Awesome. And we're live on YouTube. Thank you everyone for joining again, an Open RFC, NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. For the folks that joined a little late, I'll just copy and paste the meeting notes doc in chat. Feel free to add yourselves to the attendees list. As is usual, we ask that folks please abide by the code of conduct that's acknowledged and linked in the agenda that we'll be following along and was posted in GitHub issue number 318 in the NPM-RC's repo. And I just want to open up the floor for folks if anybody had any announcements or any news they want to share. Nope. If not, just I guess a quick reminder, NPM 7 went GA last week, and we just want to encourage everybody to continue to use that, give us feedback as we continue to make releases happen each week and improve, the features and functionality of NPM. We have a very short agenda today. There's only 3 items. I'm guessing the last item will essentially just be a quick update in terms of the workspaces work and sort of, us kicking that off, improvements to workspaces, since we had a pretty good discussion about it last week. So if there's nothing else from folks, I want to dive right in. The first item is PR 317. It's an RFC from I believe this is Divlo. I'm not sure if they were able to join. I'll copy and paste the issue for folks. I saw that, Jordan, you had commented. I'm not sure if other folks had had a chance to read this RFC yet. Essentially publishing, setting and tagging accordingly to Semver version. I'm just reading this over now myself.
Jordan, I don't know if you want me to comment, but I can comment on this.
Sure, Wes, go ahead.
Here.
Go ahead.
Okay. We do this. I do this. I just do it out of band from NPM. So I think it's generally a good idea. I think there's some caveats here which make building it into NPM more complicated than is laid out in this. So if the goal is to replace the behavior that people are doing out of band, if the goal is not to do that and just to have this be sort of a basic baseline feature, then I big thumbs up. But I know, like, we have a bunch of logic, like it includes the build number in that, or it includes the git hash in that, right? And so if you start trying to layer on this functionality on top of pre-existing common workflows, you'll end up with a dis tag that is gibberish. Right, like imagine if the dis tag was feature-foo-123-acdfg, right? Because you had already previously configured your build to do that, right? So those dis tags get really wild. They also incidentally blow up your pacument over time. So this is a problem I'm hoping to find a solution for at some point as well, since I said I am doing this. But right now it's not super apparent, other than if you go and clean them up, but you don't know who's consuming them. So you have to be very careful about cleaning them up. And there's just a bunch of complexity there that sort of explodes as soon as if you were to start doing this for every package everywhere. That said, thumbs up in general if we can find a way to make that good and work for folks.
I'm not sure, Roy, if you can help with notes, or somebody else as well. I can also try to take notes as we go along here. I see Jordan and I think Isaac had their hands up first.
Isaac was next, yeah.
Okay, feel free to go, and then Bradley.
Yeah, so my only comment on this is I think using the Semver pre-release tag is not the optimal way to do it, just because pre-release tags kind of have their own semantics attached to them as part of Semver. In fact, putting the dist tag name in the version is probably not great at all, because at some point I may want to publish something as beta and then kind of upgrade it to latest once it's gotten appropriate testing. And if it's in the version number, now I have to do a subsequent publish. What would be really nice, which my own out of band management of dist tags is considerably less involved than what Wes describes, but we do have a number of packages where we our current the current latest publishes something like version 5, but then somebody finds a security bug or just some other breaking thing that's broken with version 4. So I want to publish a 4.0.10, but I don't want that to clobber latest. So what I usually do is I create a Git branch for that, for that v4 release branch, update package.json to add a publish config with tag equals, v4 legacy or something, and then go ahead and publish it. What would be really nice is a way either, in the either config for that project or even in package.json to say, if the version matches this range, then it should be this publish config. And if the version matches that range, it should be that other publish config. And then I could just kind of have one thing. The tricky bit is I still have to go and edit something in that v4 branch, right? Another way that we could tackle this or start looking at it is to actually make it a registry side config. So at the top level pacument, right, we add like a new kind of like, dist tag default thing, so that if you're publishing it and your tag is latest, but the pacument says, version 4 shouldn't be latest, version 4 should be legacy v4, then it will swap the default. So those are kind of two different areas for exploration I think might be worth looking into, and would still allow us to kind of avoid having too much kind of churn in the ecosystem, right? Because we don't want to make it too easy to have a zillion different dist tags. Like, you don't want to use the git sha as your dist tag, but we can do something like that. And just the last, I lost it. So we can move on to Jordan. I forgot what I was going to say. I might come back.
Jordan and then Bradley.
Sure. Okay, so the use cases I'm interested in solving here, and I actually don't have an opinion really too much about just the way it's solved, is there's kind of two things. One is, like Isaac mentioned, backports. So I posted this package, safe publish latest, in the chat. I use that as in pre-publish in all my packages so that I don't have to do per backport changes. And anytime I then do a backport, it won't let me accidentally publish an older Semver version as latest. I would love it if NPM had this either by default or via NPM RC, so that I then could obsolete my package. But essentially, like, even an opt-in way to avoid this sort of accident would be great, because it would be really nice to have fewer footguns so that authors were more willing to backport vulnerability and bug fixes and things like that. Whereas right now it's sort of a pain. The other use case is just forgetting the tag. So for example, I have packages where I have pre-releases of the next minor, and I have to remember now to explicitly specify the tag when I publish them, so that they're later. So it's not actually like wrong to publish them as latest, but I'm not ready for that yet. So I have to remember to do that. And separately, even NPM has at times forgotten to update the long list of dist tags that a new NPM version should update. And presumably NPM would like to automate that in some way as well. So something registry side sort of doesn't excite me, because that's outside of Git and isn't equally portable to third-party registries and so on. But package.json config seems fine. I think the main challenge of using a Semver range is that I don't believe there's an easy way to say target all pre-releases that are in the next channel, no matter what the preceding version is. Like, I think you can target version 1 dot, next, but I don't think you can target every next ever. So like, it might be more complicated to figure out. But that's sort of my use cases. I would like any pre-release, I would like to be put under the next tag, let's say, or of any version ever. And I want that to be automatic. And then I would love another thing that says, if this is older than the latest version, please automatically, either pick another tag or alternatively error out and force me to specify a tag, right? Which is what Save Publish Latest does. And the combination of those two features would satisfy all my use cases somehow. That's my bet.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bradley?
Sure. We might be a little unique in this scenario. I'm going to link something in the chat. We have an entire build system based on dist tags. And so this is managed out of band using kind of a custom set of stuff that acts like an NPM registry and intercepts things. My main concern with putting this in the package JSON is we manage generally 3 to 4 different dist tags at a given time, and they're built differently off the same source. And so this is going to be dev, test, staging, and prod for us generally. If the tags are hard-coded into a package, that's going to get very awkward for us because we're maybe using this differently than most people, but putting the environment basically into the version isn't going to work well for us. We don't want to be mixing the environments when we're, pushing something out to the build system. That's my only comment.
Isaac, I see you still have your hands up. Did you remember the other comment you wanted to make?
No, I just forgot to lower it.
So it sounds like there's a bit of a want for this to be a little bit more automated from some folks. Obviously, Bradley, it sounds like you have some concerns just about this exactly.
Only if it gets mixed,
right.
Because if this gets committed somewhere and then it starts pulling down dist tags, that would be bad.
So it seems like making dist tags by default is kind of a non-starter, both because it blows up the size of the package, and also because there's use cases like Wes's and Bradley's that are valid and would really get messed up if it made tags by default. But I do believe that there's some behaviors that could be done by default that would be more restrictive than just blindly publishing things as latest like it does now. Meaning by default, it could error out, like I said, and say, this is a pre-release. Are you sure you want it to be latest? Do this if you really want it. And then separately, or in addition to either as a follow-on or in parallel, and you could do prompts and then if it's not a TTY error out or something like that. But the other feature that you could have that would complement this is some sort of config, whether it's in package JSON or npm RC. Probably npm config is nice because then it can be done with environment variables, which probably fits in better, I'm guessing, into Wes and Bradley's use cases than per package config because it's more kind of controlled by the infra team. But either way, something that then says, instead of erroring out, when it matches these criteria, use this dist tag automatically. And then the default behavior is the safe thing, which is here you go, here's an extra step. Say yes or rerun with this flag. If you really want it to be latest, you're good. And then you can configure it to avoid that friction to match your exact behavior. That seems like a nice middle ground here that enables the behavior without screwing over existing use cases, and also it closes up a little bit the existing foot gun.
Wes?
Yeah, I like that. Big fan. I've definitely published many a pre-release on latest and then had to go follow up a quick release. So big fan of that specific change. Configuring it sounds good. If we could do that, it would probably still be usable in my case, even if I wanted to provide some more custom logic, right, I would configure, yeah, if it's an environment variable, fine. However it needs to happen for that. So that would definitely, if that's where this evolved, I think I would definitely give it a full thumbs up.
Yeah, so Jordan said it. I also commented just in chat that we have accepted RFC for published prompts, which we still need to implement, which again might help in in this regard a little bit if those were like configurable in some way as well.
Oh, could I add one other thing then, while we're at it? Multiple dis tags with one publish would be also awesome. So some mechanism to say, I want to publish this under these 3 dis tags would be helpful to my use case. I have to do it out of band. I'm doing it out of band. Oh, it's not doing it yet, but the tool I'm working on will be doing it out of band, where it'll just send separate commands after the publish to add the secondary and tertiary dis tags.
NPM itself seems to do the same thing, right?
Yeah, so we send multiple, after publish, we'll essentially update multiple dis tags, but we can do that in a single NPM dis tag update with multiple dis tags that you're updating. So it is a 2-line, as far as I know today. I'm not sure if tag supports multiple today. If it doesn't, that's potentially a different RFC we could write. Yeah.
It does not. And I think actually npm dis tag set or npm dis tag add, you have to, call it multiple times. You can't add multiple dis tags at once.
It's supposed to take an array, so our docs are wrong then.
Config set takes can take multiple key value pairs.
So our docs are wrong then, as far as I know, because we do specify that you're able to set a published version to multiple dis tags at once through npm dis tags. So,
are you sure don't say that you can assign the multiple tags to a single version, but doesn't specify whether it's doable with one command or not? Because I feel like the way I read it when I was looking at this and actually tried to set multiple in one command, I think my reading of it was just, they're just commenting on how you can structure dis tags, not necessarily the specifics of that capabilities of that command.
Yeah, it doesn't say that you can do multiple dis tags in one command invocation.
Right. Okay. So I read that wrong.
I think you're thinking of npm config set, which as of npm version 7 does allow you to set multiple key value pairs at once in one command. Like if you do npm config set key equals val, key2 equals val2, it'll set them both.
So I think what we're talking about sounds like a separate RFC.
Yeah.
But might be something we definitely want because we would use it ourselves and make folks' lives a lot easier.
Well, it kind of, this is speaking from the things I want, but it kind of sounds like we have 3 RFCs here. One is publish prompts. One is making the tag selection for latest safer by default. And the other is providing some sort of configuration for automatic tag selection. And all 3 of those can proceed independently and incorporate the others as they land, meaning anything that errors out can become a prompt when it's a TTY, and anything that errors out can be overridden by a config, and so on and so forth. Does that seem like, is that just my thinking, or is it other folks share that?
I think you're right. The most actionable is obviously the RC we already have going, which is publish prompts aren't going. It's accepted, so we just need to actually queue up the work to get that implemented, and then make it configurable, I guess. The secondary one, in terms of the setting multiple dis tags, I think is also extremely actionable. Like potentially queuing that up for the registry folks to allow that endpoint to accept multiple tags, which I think would also improve the experience here. The last of which I don't think we have an RFC for, that this is, I guess, trying to like improve, is that like those defaults are the automation of setting tags. Like I think that publish prompts essentially are where you would want to validate that you're like that validation step is like happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think my thing, the one pile that I want about like not naively publishing things to latest that they probably don't want latest, that I think should use a publish prompt once that's available. But I also think that in a non-TTY or in the absence of publish prompts, it would just error out with instructions of how to avoid the error. Right? Like I think publish prompts are a progressive enhancement that should not be required for any functionality because it can't work in a non-TTY. And so like there's probably a buttload of things that that should use publish prompts, but like that don't need them to function. And I think the rest of the things we've been discussing are in that category. But I agree with you that publish prompts being already accepted makes it the most actionable.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to read through this a little bit more thoroughly because I only skimmed this RFC just before the call. But it sounds like, you know, just to time box the conversation, it sounds like this is something we'll leave for next week as well, and try to ideate a bit more. Feel free to like add feedback here, and if we think there's a separate RFC, like Jordan, if you think there's a separate like capability we could potentially consider, or like we should improve on the RFC for publish prompts, feel free to queue that up, or we can work on something together to write something. Was there any more comments or feedback on this RFC specifically that folks had? If not, we can move on to the second item that we had, and probably what I thought would take up more time today is essentially RFC number or pull request 314, which I'll share with folks here. And this is the registry protocol RFC, which is spawned out of the common thread or RFC issue that Isaac put together originally. Would love if you could maybe detail, you know, this a little bit, Isaac.
Yeah, this is basically the RFC for the RRFC that we discussed, adding registry dependency specifiers. I see there's a little bit of there's some feedback back and forth with Zoltan. He mentioned like doesn't see the benefits versus using direct tarball URLs. I mean, the benefit is you can have a semver range, right? And the I'm not sure what that like moving it into a separate field really gets us, although that is maybe another another addition that we could do. We could say, you know, there's you know, basically you can arbitrarily set any specifier type. That's a second RFC. So yeah, I've got some feedback to Zoltan Kochan's feedback. But I think it's basically what we discussed. You put registry : the URL, a hash sign, and then name, and optionally, you know, at specifier.
Yeah.
So it's a little verbose, but it's also very explicit, and we can build we can either build a, you know, additional like custom registry per package.json thing on top of it, or we can make alias packages kind of de-sugar to this. So it's a good building block, I think.
For sure. And I think you understated the benefit here. Major benefit is I think the semver part of this. So Wes, I don't know who was first, Wes or Bradley. Wes, I think I saw your hand, or Bradley.
Me first either, but Bradley, if you want to go first, you can. Doesn't matter to me.
Sure, I'll just take it. So I like it, but I did have a question, especially regarding a blog post as of yesterday. So this would let you specify which registry to pull from, but is this gonna give a way for registries to know where it's expected to be pulled from? In particular, I worry that with this, you could have the same issue that you had with this dependency confusion. I don't think that this feature has to solve dependency confusion. Just wondering if there was a way for a private registry to see that it should not cascade into a different registry.
No, I don't.
There's all.
Yeah, I don't think that's the
Yeah,
intent
so
of this exactly. Yeah, sorry.
I am not aware of any NPM registries that cascade into another registry for a thing that they already have locally, and there may be some.
When you
but
when you say specifically NPM registries, do you mean from the NPM Inc. or formerly known as?
I mean NPM Inc. formerly known as. I mean GitHub packages. I mean JFrog, and I mean Sonatype, and
Okay.
I mean Verdaccio.
Okay,
Almost
JFrog.
almost every configuration of Verdaccio, JFrog, etc., does cascade into the public registry and then cache things.
Hold on.
But
hold on. It proxies. That's different.
right.
Cascading is I run npm install express and I have an express in my local registry, but it picks the public one because it has a higher version number.
Right. What you're describing is the source of a recent attack, which is a bug in those registries. That is not like that's all it is.
So just to be mindful, folks. Yeah. Just be mindful. I'd like to keep the conversation focused on the RFC specifically, which actually predates any recent news or anything like that. And also just to be mindful that like, if we want to talk about registry specific behavior, like that's, I think, a separate talk.
Fair. I want to respond to,
because we don't need to solve it with this.
Yeah. Well, it kind of does. It at least gives you another tool for mitigating it. Now, on the one hand, yes, it does leak more information. Like now your package JSON, which people are just putting in their Webpack bundles pretty frequently, will include the URL of your internal registry. So you've given an attacker, a target. You've said like, oh, if you can get to this host name, then you're going to own us. On the other hand, you were already telling them the package names. So not really giving them that much more, assuming that internal host name is locked down behind your firewall. And what you've done is you've made it impossible to accidentally fetch the internal package from the public registry. So I think it does actually, it's probably like, I wouldn't say it's a unmitigated win, but it is a tool that's probably a net benefit in the context of that specific attack discussed yesterday. The other thing about registry behavior, like people are going to proxy and they're going to do other things. But I do think NPM is in a little bit better state than some other package managers in that regard.
So I can maybe take from here, because so when this was originally brought up, I was already aware of this particular behavior, and
in fact, that's why we shot down 217, right? Like that was specifically the argument.
Yes, exactly. And so it is kind of relevant. It is relevant, and I think you hit the nail on the head with it. Prevents some other types of confusion attacks, which rely on going to the public registry when the engineer thought they were not. So that's great. Totally. It does not fully solve the particular blog post reference here about the confusion attacks, because those do rely on registry proxy behaviors. Unfortunately, those registry proxy behaviors almost entirely exhibit the problematic state we're in right now. So so again, leaving off the fact that this doesn't fully solve for that other problem, I think that the big win here is the Sember range, and I think at that we could just call it good. As far as leaking more, I think you are correct. The leak of the name is the key to the problem we were discussing with the confusion attack. So that doesn't make this any worse. Aliasing, if we wanted to do something like that, I think would be very good. because you could actually avoid the leakage by moving the aliasing out of the package JSON and into a config value, which would mean you would not be able to install it without those config values set because the alias would be ambiguous. But it would also mean that if somebody packaged up their package JSON into their Webpack build, they wouldn't leak the URL. They'd only leak the alias, which would be sort of a nice way around, that if we thought that was a real problem. Also, it would mean that you don't have an extra key in the package JSON if you move the alias to config. So I think if we wanted to do the alias route, that would be what would get my vote. And I feel that we went through like 7 different topics, so I was trying to make sure I tackled all of my comments on that. But I think, and then the only other thing which I think is important to consider here is what happens when these are published to the public registry, which I don't recall seeing that tackled in the RFC, but if we expect Yarn and PNPM to be able to install these because they're in a public, in the public registry as part of somebody's tree, we need to make sure we have a clear answer there.
Yeah, so I think as far as like what happens when we publish them, it is a downside, right? You're going to have something that can't be installed with NPM 6 and before, and can't be installed with presumably some versions of Yarn and PNPM. The flip side of that is, and even more importantly, even when you have NPM 7, you can't install it unless you have access to that registry. The first problem is sort of unavoidable if we add any kind of thing like this, like actually not being installable with NPM 6 was the goal, because that was the problem with RFC 217. We would try to install it and ignore the config, and it would silently work and allow you to get owned. Not installing unless you have access to the URL, I think is fine. It's not any worse than tarball URLs, which people are using today for some things like this, so it's fine.
Jordan, I saw you had your hand up, and then Bradley, I think you.
Well, that's from before. Sorry.
Okay, Bradley, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I didn't hear this mentioned explicitly, so I just wanted to bring it up. I'd explicitly like us not to have tarball URLs, particularly the way it's specified right now. You could imagine that these URLs are rewritten to be subdomains instead. S3 actually had a change of how they architected some stuff so that you could get different origins and different certs per subdomain, and it's just something that would not be possible if you use tarball URLs. Having this kind of indirect or abstract URL makes it possible to transition to such a thing if desired in the future. That's all.
Okay. Any Wes thumbs up. So it does, with that feedback, Bradley, is there changes you would want to see in the RFC then?
No, I think it's actually perfectly fine as is. It doesn't specify where the thing actually lives, which is the important bit. And the thing is potentially able to live in subdomains with unique certs. So it's all good.
So in general, is there any feedback or changes we would want to see to the way this is written today, or like how we'd essentially implement this?
From my end, no, but I do think looking at what S3 did to migrate from path-based buckets to subdomain-based buckets would be a good follow-on eventually. There's no need to do it.
Resources we could look at, or that you have that we could share?
I'll dig up it and put it in the Zoom chat, but I'm gonna have to drop for another meeting.
Okay, I appreciate it if you can reference
those. We could dig into that for sure, but I think from the point of view of the CLI, a different subdomain and path is a different registry, like entirely.
I think that's a interesting viewpoint necessarily, but at least for S3, they did it for various reasons of having problems with security on path. There's a blog post, and you can kind of spider around and find more info from there. Okay, I gotta
Cool.
go.
Have fun.
Thank you so much. Cheers. For other folks,
My only point
go
is
ahead.
that I really, when this lands, if it makes it its way to a large projects tree and breaks a lot of people, we need to make sure we're just really crystal clear about the expectations of using this, and that it will break installs if you do not have access to that registry. Like, and that's the only part that I think is missing in this description.
Sorry, could you say that one more time, Wes? I was taking notes there.
Sorry, it's just that
Just so I capture it.
As soon as this goes out and gets included into a very popular, dependency, and breaks people because they don't have access to that registry for whatever reason, right? That we need to make sure that the full documentation is there of like, use this at your own and your consumer's risk, like being crystal clear about the ramifications of not having access to the registry, or having it not work with an npm 6, right? Like those things are not in the RFC, and will be incredibly important with how this gets messaged once it goes out.
Yeah, that's a good thing to be mindful of. Okay, I'm just taking those notes here. Any other comments on that? Isaac, did you want to follow up to all that feedback?
No, I think I just followed up to the comments on the RFC PR itself, and I added Wes's thing about being crystal clear in the RFC and the docs that will break on early NPM versions and anyone who doesn't have access to that registry.
Awesome. So
Yeah,
if we want, go ahead, Rook.
Yeah, maybe just quickly mention that you also had an very quickly informal chat with Mael when I was pinging both Yarn and PNPM to try and get their eyes on it. So he did quickly mention that he would like to see a little bit more extensive alternative section. I don't know if it's the case, but he mentioned he will try to get some time to give actual feedback in the RFC. So if it's still open sometime, maybe we also get him to chime in. But he was rather acceptive to the idea, I think.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that, Roy, and reaching out to those folks. It's great when PNPM and Yarn maintainers are interested in this, and obviously we're aligned. So that's great. I think we should probably leave this open for now until maybe another week, give folks a little bit more time. As you noted, Roy, maybe Mael will chime in with some feedback as well in the PR itself. But ideally, we can potentially, accept this and sort of ratify it next week if possible, because I know it's something that we definitely want to get queued up and start work on here in the next little while. So, okay, moving on to the last item that we had on the agenda today, and then if there's some time left, we can open up the floor for other conversations. But the last PR 117, or the last RFC, which is the NPM workspaces work, which I know has is something that we were speaking to last week quite a bit, and whether or not we can sort of like decouple the work itself from discussing and sort of even potentially changing the way that workspaces are implemented today. So I think just for, I guess, a quick update from what we discussed last week was it sounded like we thought that work could be decoupled. And if there's any underlying changes to how workspaces are actually implemented, we can actually, might duplicate some work there, but it sounds like we don't want to stall on actually getting started with making workspaces, the experience of using workspaces better by allowing you to run commands in workspaces today. I think for the folks that were there, is that a good summation of what we talked about?
Yeah, I think one good point I remember Isaac brought up in one of the last discussions on it is maybe because right now in the RFC, it's still describing listing workspaces using a named argument. And I know it was floated around switching that to a positional instead, and just, so I think maybe that's the only thing that like can still open to some discussion, but maybe it's just something we want to tweak when we start having a POC implementation to actually try out. So, but anyways, yeah, I think if Isaac has any follow-up on that idea.
Maybe you could explain that a little bit, or if you can share a reference to the comment.
Well, yeah, instead of using -w and workspace name, just use like npm /s and then the list of names, right? Just the ergonomics of that syntax.
Yeah, it's. I think my comment was it's actually easier to just make it a top level command called workspace or WS or whatever, and then we can be a little bit more like creative about what goes underneath that command. And we don't have to worry about situations where you configure the where you configure npm_config_ws in the environment, and now you go to a different project and everything breaks, or you put it in your local npm-rc because you think you have to config set it. Make it a top level command so much easier.
Yeah, I think that's the only adjustment I'll probably make to the RFC, like even before starting the POC work on it.
Yes, please. Yeah. Let's clean up the RFC if there's points like that have been made. I know, if you can take that as an action item and get it cleaned up at least for next week, if possible, that'd be great.
We need a thing where like every time we add a new config to npm, we have to put like, I was going to say put $1 in a jar, but
a jar, yeah.
No, you got to put $100 in a jar every time, and
Well, this is something for people that don't know. We support infinite config today, so
I know it's always such a hassle. So yeah, top level.
We're gonna go broke here if.
I just have one quick comment on. I saw Isaac's last comment on the RFC about being clear that it'll break older versions. Would it be nice if npm, when it noticed that a package JSON in the current directory has a registry specifier, if it also warned if you don't specify engines.npm?
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that probably,
because then it's not just explicit for that user, it's also transitive.
Yeah, and then also npm 6 will not try to npm 6 will use a previous version instead, rather than resolving to it. So
right,
yeah, we could do something like
it fits
that.
neatly into everything.
Can you make that comment there so I don't lose it?
You got it.
Thanks. On the workspaces thing, I wanted to bring up real quick a request for RFC. Jordan, you have mentioned a few times, kind of wanting to rethink somewhat rethink the like semantics in the data model of like what is shared between workspaces, what is not shared, what is isolated. And I think that there's a really good opportunity here to just like put aside all implementation details and talk about like, okay, if I'm in this project, I do require foo, and I get a shared thing, a thing that's not shared, a thing that's shared with the root, a thing that's shared with only other packages in the workspace, whatever that is. And I think if we can kind of get that list down, then that will help us know like what are the cases, and then design the implementation a little bit more thoughtfully. So what we have now is really simple, which is great. Like that got us out the door super quick, and it was real easy to implement. It's easy to reason about,
when it matches what Yarn and Learn to do.
Yeah, which is just
Well,
like a workspace is a linked app, basically, is how it works. It's like an automatically glob-based linked app. So if we wanted to make something more clever, then we should be really thoughtful about exactly how we're going to make it more clever. And I would like to get that done before we make too much progress on like npm workspace add, right? Because there may be things that we're going to want to specify when you're adding a workspace, or we're going to want to do
So
differently, right?
I think I can describe it relatively tersely.
Mhm.
What I would like to see in a workspace is that after I run my workspace install, like my setup my workspace command, it is as if I ran npm install on the root and cd'd into each package and ran npm install. With one additional thing on top, which is that within the workspace, peer dependencies are shared without being hoisted, and other workspace dependencies are shared without being hoisted. And by hoisted, I mean moved up to the root. And that's it. And then any additional deduplication that doesn't include hoisting is totally fine. Like npm can share more stuff if it wants, as you know. But I want the but the only things that must be shared are peer deps and other workspace deps. And the reason hoisting needs to be avoided in all cases is because nothing should be able to require something that isn't in it or its parents package JSON.
Right.
So that's it. That's the whole feature.
So
go ahead, Christian, and then Isaac. Yeah.
Well, actually, I would even go as far and say that I would want to disable the standard node modules behavior of like you have something in the root folder, which would be like your workspace entry point, right? And it gets shared with like all of the child package JSONs. I would like to disable that for workspaces because I'm running into a problem now with Webpack 5 where we have like Webpack in every package JSON, but we also have it in the root itself. And Webpack itself does like a instance of. And obviously that's no longer the same if you're like if you're linking dependencies. So here the traditional node module sharing becomes very much an issue.
So sorry, just so we can write a note again there, Christian, can you rephrase that one more time?
So think about like you had a packages folder with like your different packages in that you would want to have like that you would want to have in your workspace. Like you would have like one like root level where you would have your dependencies, right? Like something like something you would use for development purposes only, like Webpack Dev Server, for example. And now in every repository or in every package, you would have something like build. So you would also have Webpack there.
Right.
And this breaks now because like suddenly Webpack gets is fetched from like the root level in cases where you don't want it to be fetched, just because like that's how node modular resolution works.
So you're saying that the current behavior, because that's essentially the current behavior gives you access to.
Yeah, and that is like the current behavior, and that is very nice if you want to hoist.
Right.
But it gives you very, very interesting things if people have like checks in their code, which are like instance off, because that is what Webpack just like moved to in version 5. And it's giving us like all kinds of very weird artifacts in like a linked environment. I can try.
So I think. Oh, go
to
ahead.
find
Christian.
like the issue that we had in like the Webpack repository, so you can follow up on that. It's just a little difficult to describe in words. Sorry.
Sure. That's okay.
To me, what I'm hearing is that let's pretend peer dev dependencies existed and we had the workspace system I've described. Then you'd make Webpack one of those, and Webpack would just kind of be shared when it was the same version between workspace projects, and it would not be hoisted. So you could have some projects on Webpack 5 and some on Webpack 4, and they would have the same Webpack 5 and they would have the same Webpack 4. We don't need a new kind of dependency bundle, so Isaac can relax, but I think some sort of solution in this new workspaces model that allows you to indicate, I want these dependencies shared whenever possible, exactly as Isaac said in chat. And you could say then Webpack, share it whenever possible, and then it would just result in that same behavior. In other words, it's kind of like pretend this dependency is a workspace step and share it, maximally share it. So you could say Webpack, you could say ESLint, you could say React or whatever. And then it just kind of like prevents those identity problems when possible and creates them when they should be created, which is when you have different versions of those things, like incompatible ranges. So that it's a good instinct to try not to talk about the implementation of a workspaces thing that I'm describing yet. But I do think that there is a solution there to what you're describing.
Yeah, basically, there's a lot of ways to solve this. I think that, and this may even be an impetus for moving to something a bit more like PNPM like, right? So we have like a node module /.npm /webpack /5.0.3, and that gets symlinked into all the things that are using a Webpack that can use it. And we kind of like dedupe as much as possible. And everybody who wants Webpack 3 can get the Webpack 3 version that we have. We can solve it with source maps. We can solve it with nesting and hoisting things up to, import maps. My bad as well, Wes. We can solve it with import maps. We can solve it with putting the dependencies in some cases in the root node modules. But the point is, like, we need a way to say, I want Webpack and I would like it to be shared among my workspace projects. And let's talk about like, okay, so we have that need. What is the best way to express that in package JSON, config, et cetera? And then we can start talking about, okay, what does that mean in terms of the layout on disk? And those are really three orthogonal questions, right? Like defining the need, defining the way to express the need, and then defining the way to meet the need.
Is there anything else on that or any of the other topics that we had today?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
Not on that, but going back to the disk tags things, while I have some people who have strong opinions about it on the call. So currently there's no way to publish without a disk tag. If you go no tag, it will tag false. And it seems to me that and that's unfortunate because it would be nice to be able to have that as your default. And then if you do -- tag during publish in your CI, it gets the tag. There's a kind of a guard, right? And just thinking forward about this of what an RFC could look like, we would have to have some extra config that say, hey, when I publish this, don't put a tag. You throw that in your RFC file. Then your actual publish process can turn that back off on the command line, right? Because it'll take precedence. That's one part, right? Then there's the multiple tags, right? So coupled with that, we also want to say -- tag in publish. I want to be able to specify more than one tag. Also an npm disk tag, because those are kind of the same thing. Taking aside, ignoring the prompt stuff and the safeguards, because that to me sounds like it's its own thing. Just that, does that solve a few of the problems y'all are having if that was one or more RFCs?
I mean, for me, like I was indicating earlier, I think there's multiple things that can all happen in parallel that
all composed to solve a lot of use cases. And what you're describing, it solves some of them for me. So I like that too.
Yeah, and I think it solves most of the things for me too. I didn't even think about the no tag scenario, but that definitely would be a great addition there. I've just put in the issue as well. Another request that I would love related to dist tags is the ability to do save exact and have it actually save exact. Because right now it translates the dist tag to the exact version number, not the dist tag you specified on the command line.
I don't.
Wes, can you repeat that? I lost you at some point.
Yeah, sorry. So npm install -- save -- exact, and then you do foo at next. It doesn't result in your package JSON saying foo : next. It results in whatever the dist tag pointed to being saved with an exact version. So what you want to a consumer is to say, hey, follow my next dist tag so that you get my updates as they roll out. But the only way to do that today is to manually edit your package JSON.
So this would save exact, you'd want to save dist.
Sure. My assumption from the behavior of save exact was save exactly what I told you to save. So it's
spec,
not
right, like the exact spec
right,
that
Well, so this is kind of tricky for this is somewhat tricky for reproducible builds. I think we used to save whatever the spec was. Ancient history here. Used to save whatever the spec was that was provided, but changed at one point because then you saving a dist tag is pretty dangerous. That's basically a greater than equals, right? You then somebody publishes a breaking change on their dist tag and everybody's hosed. This is what we're seeing. We learned that a lot of people were depending on npm at latest in a lot of places rather than npm.
What happens if you saved next or a version range? Is that just invalid?
That'll just, that is invalid.
Okay, because something like that would allow it to use next if it's there and then fall back to the version range when it's not and address that concern, possibly.
And think about the npm 6 thing, people might want to lock into 6 with the 6 dist tag here, right?
Right. Yeah. Changing our save behavior for dist tag specified on the command line or in anywhere else to save the dist tag rather than the resolved version is a pretty significant behavior and semantics change. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it is definitely significant and should get its own careful analysis.
Yeah,
so just
that
to be
makes
mindful,
sense to me. It was just the behavior seemed unexpected to me, and I was trying to come up with a better way to do it. If we opted for another flag just to make it easier to roll out, that's perfectly acceptable. Yeah, save spec would be good. Yeah, save dist tag would be
go
good.
write that RFC.
Awesome. Thanks for those top ups there, Gar. So just be mindful of time. We're about a minute after, so I appreciate folks staying a couple of minutes late, and want to encourage everybody to provide feedback and keep pushing along these RFCs. And we'll have a couple new ones in the week or two that I've kind of alluded to come that are in the same area in terms of what we've been talking about for a while now in terms of strategies and modes and those types of things. So look out for those in the next couple of weeks. Appreciate everybody jumping on today again, and hopefully see you next week. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Hey.